Hey everybody, this is Chase Petiche. I'm back with a Witchy Bitch weekly message. This week I want to talk about the wild, the messy, and the imperfect because I've just recently relocated to Los Angeles, the place of my birth. I'm literally living on the same block as the hospital I was born in, which is a crazy homecoming. 2020 Saturn-Pluto conjunction craziness, but and I've been really absorbing the energies of LA and really taking in, you know, the freedom, the creativity, and also the darkness, because every place has it, every person has it, everything has it, right? And you know, there's just so much creativity here. There's so much aliveness, and it's such a beautiful thing to be a part of. There's also, on the flip side of that, this real intense emphasis on looking perfect. And that's why I felt really inspired this week to speak to this now that I'm here. Underneath that, I've been going to the gym and I've been seeing, I haven't lived in LA. I haven't been back to LA. My dad, lived here, and then he had a stroke and moved away. But, so I would always come, I was born here and I would always come here and visit him. But I haven't been here in probably about 15 years, really. And there's been a lot that's changed with technology and with plastic surgery. And, I'm not dogging on anybody that gets plastic surgery. Like, it's part of how you want to express yourself. It's part of, how you feel. But what I am sensing on a deeper level with a lot of people that seem to have a lot of emphasis placed on how they look and making sure they look a certain way is this deeper underlying fear that seems to pervade a lot of the energy around here. And that's what I really want to speak to, because the fear is part of the perfection, and it's really this emphasis placed on how others really view us, how we come off to others. And it's really starting to live one's life almost kind of like imprisoned to other people's opinions. And when that happens, we really we lose touch with that wild, pure and messy part of ourselves that is truly authentic. And we disengage. Truly, that part that is the wild part is the intuitive. It's the divine feminine. It's the part that is led without understanding why. And when we are constantly in this maze of trying to make sure that we look okay, so much emphasis is placed on the exterior and very little is placed on the interior. And yeah, I think that there's definitely a lot of spiritual work that people do here, but it's very much in this vein of love and light, a lot of yoga, a lot of chanting, a lot of, just staying positive. And I think that the times we are in are actually calling for something deeper, that actually starting to challenge and reflect on our shadow, on the darker parts of the self, on the parts that we are not fully conscious of, or that are actually imprisoning us, like our fear, our shame, the parts of ourselves that are wounded, the parts that we don't even fully want to acknowledge ourselves. And so when we kind of are in this place where we're constantly focusing on the external and making sure that we look okay externally, we really become kind of robotic, because we're not allowing that kind of authentic, messy, spontaneous part of ourselves to kind of emerge, right? Because we're keeping it under control, which when we keep things under control fully, we become robotic, That is the masculine. That is, we need to have the masculine and the feminine in balance. And all of the work that I do is all about enhancing and awakening the feminine energy on this planet. But we've been so inundated with the masculine, which is this energy of control and achievement and doing and never having enough. And there has to be a point where we start to tune into that wild, internal rhythm that is our intuitive mystery with it, that is the internal mystery within, that we don't even ourselves fully understand. And when we start to access that, we start to rewild and we start to open up to that part of ourselves that is getting guided by something higher, we start to allow the truth of our internal self to be more reflected on the outside. And this can be incredibly liberating. I think for people that have spent many years very, 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 very concerned with the exterior, it's probably like extremely scary, because letting go of that control of needing to have that control is incredibly frightening. But on the flip side of that, right, is liberation, right? Which is what these times are calling for. And you know, when we really start to tap into our own inner wildness and our own inner mess, and we start to allow that imperfect, authentic part of ourselves to kind of come out, we start tuning into what really feels right versus what should feel right. And I think that is a big indicator of how much we're honoring the truth of our own souls versus what we feel like we should do in order to fit in. And this is a huge distinction, and I think so many people for so many years have been so trained and conditioned and domesticated into feeling that what they should do is their truth. That when you start to uncover that and unpack that a little bit, so many people don't know who they are. But these things have to kind of start to unravel and come apart so that we can expose the truth of ourselves, so that we can begin to live a life that is more in tune with our own joy, with our own authentic, raw, messy, imperfect self, right? Because the divine feminine, you know, the divine feminine is the internal, it is the mysterious, it is also the, it's imperfect. It's, you know, we have this idea in our culture that we want to attain this good, to be perfect, to be in the light, to be, you know, we have this dark light dichotomy. And what's starting to happen in our culture is we're entering an age of paradox, which is the integration of the dark, which is the undercurrent. The dark isn't bad. It's the undercurrent, it's the subconscious, it's what's really happening on the inside. But because, and that's also the realm of the feminine, but because that energy has been so demonified for so many years, it's finally starting to come up out of the closet. And what happens is when we start reconciling that energy with our external energy of what we're showing the world, we begin to embrace paradox, where two things that are seeming opposites actually can simultaneously exist. This is the quantum energy. This is the quantum era, right? Paradox, where you're not black or white. You are gray. You are both. You are all. And when we really start opening up to our own imperfection and allowing ourselves to even be a little bit ugly, to start to embrace the ugly parts of ourselves, what happens is that we're no longer resisting this thing inside that really feels inadequate, that feels ugly, that we're constantly trying to fix on the outside to make sure that we're okay. When we start to open up to that ugliness that we actually feel but we're resisting on such a deep level, what happens is that we're liberated and we don't feel this deep need to keep controlling. And what we actually begin to embrace that part of ourselves that is imperfect, that's messy, that is wild. And you know, wild things are actually perfect. They are actually perfect because there is no standard of perfection that they are getting compared to. Think about that for a second. Something that is purely wild, that humans haven't set a standard for, it's beautiful, it's perfect, right? It comes from nature. It's sprouted from a deeper energy, a deeper cosmic flow. That in of itself is fucking glorious. It's beautiful. But when we start to measure it and count it and compare it, then it becomes ugly. It becomes distorted. It becomes faulty. And then we do the same things to ourselves as humans. So, yeah, I really would like to just challenge you all to really start to try to dive into the truth of trying to control your exterior, and what that actually means when confronting your inner self. Because there's always this level, I mean, I am totally, the reason I can speak to this is because this is something that has affected me my whole life. You know, I was born in Los Angeles. My mother was literally a beauty queen, and I was chubby my whole life. Like, not just chubby, like obese when I was really young. And, you know, I had this, you know, beauty, but I also had this thing that made me so ugly, you know? And I was always trying to reconcile that. I was always trying to allow myself to be beautiful amidst being so overweight. And, you know, there's these women that nowadays that come out that are these beautiful, curvy, plus size models, and they're doing both. They are, like, you know, for somebody like Tess Holliday, who I freaking love. She is this super fat, incredibly gorgeous woman who is a supermodel. And what she has done is she's embracing paradox, something that in our culture we have seen as being incredibly ugly, right? Being fat, being overweight, which is like the worst thing you could ever be in Los Angeles, right? She's taken that and blended that with her incredible beauty. And what's happened is she's become this paradoxical unicorn character. Why do you think unicorns are so popular right now? It's paradox. It's both things. It's magic. And that's the era that we're coming into, where somebody is not one or the other. They are both, right? And, you know, start to think about how you can embody both things in your life, you know? I'm still a curvaceous woman. Like, that's still part of who I am. And, you know, I embrace paradox. And if I lived my life setting myself against the standard of beauty that is presented here in Los Angeles, I would, which I did when I was young, which created, I gained so much weight. I was so unhappy. I felt so much shame. And, you know, I've come back here so grounded in myself and knowing who I am, and not judging myself against what the opinions of others, but having my own deeper access to my own deeper internal truth, which gives me the highest level of worth. And I have my own divine access to source, which is how I am choosing to live in this world, which gives me the highest level of self-worth. And I'm not seeking my worthiness from sources outside of myself. I'm only seeking my worthiness through my connection with God, the goddess, the divine. And so this is what I like to teach people to do. And in order to get to this place, we have to do shadow work, which is starting to confront the deeper layers of shame and fear that keep us in that deeper maze of control. But yeah, those are my thoughts today. The wild, the messy, the imperfect. How can we begin to embrace more paradox? How can we allow ourselves to be beautiful and messy, to be beautiful and imperfect? It's so incredibly liberating. Ask yourself that. Challenge yourself to ask yourself that today. So much love to you all, and many blessings. I hope you've had a good holiday and a happy new year. 2020 is on the horizon. Woohoo! Love you.